it both from the Jewish culture and the language that Yeshua spoke in, which was the Hebrew language, in that context, you get all these insights. And one of the places which is really cool, and we were talking about this before, is in John 17. And can we get to John 17?
I think so. Yeah. Well, one of the things we left off was in the book of the Revelation, where 1.5 chapters in Hebrew,
preserved in a Hebrew manuscript that's found in the British Library. It's you can look it up online. It's Sloan 273. I did a 3-hour podcast. You can find it in my Hebrew Voices, and it's an amazing manuscript. There's all kinds of amazing insights in it. One of them that I shared last week was that when in Revelation 1:8, in there in the Hebrew it says Ani ha'alef ha'tav, I am the Aleph and the Tav, the first and last letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Yehovah ha'Elohim, Yehovah the God, the one true God. That's what it says there in the Hebrew. And, that's really interesting because some scholars have said, well, at Patmos, there was this big shift and God made it clear that he's no longer using that name, the name Yehovah, that Jesus has accepted the rabbinical ban on the name. And
which hadn't even happened at that time.
It hadn't happened at that time. There was an Essene ban on the name at that time, but
and a Roman ban. They didn't want anyone.
No, that was before the Roman ban, Patmos. Meaning we're talking
right. Yeah, it was before the Roman ban.
Right,
even.
right, exactly. Before the Roman ban, before the rabbinical ban. So it's kind of an anachronism. But he's taking it based on the Greek text as it's preserved. We don't have the name Yehovah. So therefore,
nor do we have in the book of Acts,
right?
So directly quoting the prophets where the name is.
So when Jesus had the opportunity to say his Father's name Yehovah, instead he said Lord, and that proves, therefore, because those are the exact words he spoke in the original Greek. Therefore, it proves that if Jesus wanted Christians or people who follow him to know that name, he would have taught them that name and made it known. Now, can we get to John 17?
Really, the John 17 setup is Yeshua, this is his last time with the disciples before the crucifixion. He knows what's going down. And these are his last words. And every time we see the last words recorded of anyone throughout the scripture, you pay particular attention to them because this is like the summation. This is where it all comes together. And now, Nehemiah, please take us there.
So, if Yeshua of Nazareth wanted his disciples to know that the name of the Father was Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, Yehovah, he surely would have told them. That's a really good, it makes sense, that argument. John 17:6. Can you read it from yours? I'll read you what I have here.
This is King James.
Yeah.
I have manifested thy name unto the men.
Manifested. Can I tell you what that sounds like to me?
Okay.
Like he's a magician and he pulled, and manifested a rabbit out of the hat. Here's what it says based on the Greek. This is the Greek text.
Just Greek, okay.
I have made your name known to those whom you gave me from the world. And then again at the end, I've made your name known. And that's what it legitimately says in the Greek. Some English translations have that. Like I'm reading here from I think it's the New Revised Standard Version. And that's what it says in the Greek. I have made your name known. John 17:26, he ends the speech. I made your name known to them. And we call that in textual studies an inclusio. He opens the speech with the phrase, I made your name known, and he ends it with the same phrase. It's a rhetorical device throughout the Hebrew language where I want to emphasize a point. I start with something and I end with it. And then if you look at 17:1, which is part of that speech, he says Father, and at the end in verse 25, again he says Father. He's addressing God as Father. And what's interesting here, now this is something that would be completely lost in the English. And I'll be honest, Michael, I didn't notice this until I was speaking with a Messianic pastor, and he said, Nehemiah, we were spending some time together studying, and he said, would you look at the Hebrew translation of John 17 for me? And I'm like, why would I look at a Hebrew translation of John 17? I know that's not the original. And I know it's from the Greek. It's by a man named Franz Delitzsch, a great Bible scholar of ancient Hebrew, who translated John 17 into the Hebrew from Greek. I said, well, why would I bother looking at that? He said, just do me a favor. So I start looking at it, and I'm blown away. Completely unexpected. I found something he didn't, he had no idea what I would find, right? So, but he had a hunch, and I give him credit. He had that hunch. And I look at it, and what I find is, I've talked in the past about Hebrew word puns. And a Hebrew word pun is where they take a certain Hebrew word and they use it repeatedly throughout the passage. And sometimes they'll use two similar sounding words repeatedly throughout the passage. You'll just punch it. They'll use that word over and over and over. And there's this great thing there where they, I bring an example in my book, The Hebrew Yeshua versus the Greek Jesus, where it's this beautiful thing where Yeshua is talking about paying a debt. And the word to pay is shalem. And he repeats the word 5 times, shalem, 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 shalem. Like at the end of the parable, you're like, do we need to keep repeating the same word? And that's the Hebrew style. And at the end he says, so shall my Father in heaven do if each man forgive his fellow with a complete heart. And the Hebrew phrase complete heart is lev shalem. So the word shalem means pay, but it also means complete. So that's a beautiful, typical Hebrew word pun. In fact, the beauty of it, of the character of the Hebrews, we're using the same word or similar sounding words with different meanings, and that ties it together. It's a way you can memorize it as well. It helped the people who weren't necessarily literate, who had just heard this once, and they'd be like, oh yeah, pay, complete heart. You know, that ties in the concept together.
And that figure of speech, you don't see it in Greek, don't see it in Aramaic, it is non-existent.
And the beauty of that example is you read it in Greek and it doesn't say a complete heart. It just says a heart, right? I mean, it's beautiful there. It's in, I think it's Matthew 18. It's in my book, Hebrew Yeshua versus the Greek Jesus. And so we have this beautiful thing here in John 17. Can we go back to John 17?
Please do.
Okay.
Please do.
So, and I only saw this when I looked in Franz Delitzsch's Hebrew translation. So this is the beautiful thing he did. He translated it from Greek into Hebrew, and things appeared that you couldn't see in the Greek or the English. So one of the things that showed up is he's talking about your name, and he says, and he has the phrase your name 3 times, your name, your name, your name. Remember, shalem, 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 just like in the parable. 3 times your name. He opens with your name. He closes with your name. I've made your name known. And then throughout he keeps talking about which you have given me. And he keeps saying this, you have given me, you have given me, you gave me, to those whom you gave me, you gave. I mean, it's repeated. And one of the things that occurred to me as I'm reading this, so there's a common word for gave in First Temple Hebrew, which is natan. But in Second Temple Hebrew, and a little bit in First Temple Hebrew, we have another word for gave, which is yahav, yahavah. So he's talking 3 times about the name, which is Yehovah, and he keeps using this verb over and over, Yahavah, 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 which sounds like the name Yehovah. And he uses this verb 16 times in 26 verses. This is not a coincidence.
Right,
Even when you read it in English, you're like, why does he keep repeating himself? Because that's the Hebrew style. You want to, punch that key word that has the sound of the point you're trying to get to, which is making the name known. So he says, I've made your name known. Those whom you gave me, you gave me, you gave me. I gave, you gave. And that's Yahavah, Yahavah, Yahavta, Yahavti, Yahavtani. It sounds like the name Yehovah. Well, if that was all, that'd be impressive, but maybe it's a coincidence. 5 times he talks about love, which is Ahava. So you'll have Yehovah, the name, Yehavah, to give, and Ahava, to love. That's 3 words that sound very similar in the Hebrew language. There's no way that he gives this speech and that's not just jumping off his lips to their ears, that he's punching this concept of those who you've given me, love, and the name of the Father, Yehovah. And of course he calls the Father Avi, my Father. So you've got Yahavah, Ahava, Yehovah, Avi. There is this, we call assonance or paranomosia. It's Hebrew word puns. This is a central theme throughout this passage of John 17. And the bottom line is, what ties all of this together is that Yeshua says, I made your name known, and we know what that name is. It's Yehovah. He is, and translating it as I've manifested your name is very clever. Right? What does that mean? I've manifested your name. I don't even know what it means, right? My actions have shown your name, and maybe that's true. Maybe that's true as well. But to make your name known, especially in the context of later Jewish history where the name became a secret. So at that time it wasn't a secret. So he's telling his disciples, if you take this at face value, the name of my Father is Yehovah.